At first, it didn't look like a breaking point. No buzzer beater, no locker room blow-up, no viral press conference. But quietly, almost casually, the balance of power in women's basketball shifted, and the league hasn't looked the same since. Because this wasn't about a game. It wasn't even really about a player. It was about a moment when the WNBA realized it might no longer be the one in control of its own biggest star. For years, fans debated whether the hype was real or manufactured, whether respect had to be earned, whether popularity should matter more than seniority. Those conversations stayed mostly online until one decision made all of them impossible to ignore. Suddenly, whispers turned into backlash, praise turned into tension, and what used to feel like internal league drama became a public power struggle playing out in real time. Some saw it as overdue recognition. Others saw it as favoritism. And a lot of people felt the league had been boxed into an impossible corner. Because once that line was crossed, there was no going back. And what happened next caught everyone completely off guard. It didn't happen during a game, and it didn't come from the league office. The moment that sent shockwaves through women's basketball came in the form of a commercial, polished, cinematic, and impossible to ignore. Nike From Anywhere campaign dropped quietly, but the reaction was instant. Fans weren't just watching it, they were dissecting it, frame by frame, name by name. And what stood out most wasn't just who appeared on screen, but who didn't. There were no WNBA teammates, no nods to league legends, no obvious attempt to anchor the moment inside women's basketball history. Instead, the commercial placed Caitlin Clark alongside global cultural figures, people whose influence stretches far beyond the sport. To some viewers, it felt like Nike wasn't celebrating a WNBA star. They were introducing a mainstream icon. That distinction mattered. Almost immediately, online conversations shifted. Some fans praised the move as a long overdue elevation of women's basketball into pop culture. Others raised eyebrows, questioning why the league itself felt absent from one of the biggest marketing moments it had ever seen. A few even wondered whether this was intentional, a signal that Nike no longer felt the need to frame Clark within the traditional WNBA ecosystem. Nike, of course, never explained the choice, and officially there was nothing controversial about it. Brands are free to market their athletes however they choose, but perception doesn't wait for press releases. To many viewers, the message felt clear. This wasn't a leg-backed moment. This was a brand declaring independence. What made it more striking was the timing. The WNBA has spent years emphasizing collective growth, shared visibility, and balance between stars. The commercial seemed to move in the opposite direction, spotlighting one figure in one lane on a much larger stage. Some fans interpreted that as confidence. Others saw it as a quiet bypass. And while no one involved said the commercial was meant to draw lines, it didn't stop people from drawing them anyway. Between league and brand, between past and future, between what women's basketball has been and what it might be becoming. Because once that commercial aired, the conversation was no longer just about Caitlin Clark. It was about who gets to define success in the WNBA and who gets left out of the picture. What made the commercial truly disruptive wasn't the visuals or the production value. It was the strategy behind it. Because the more fans looked at it, the clearer it became. This wasn't designed for the typical WNBA audience. Nike didn't market Caitlin Clark like a league star. They marketed her like a crossover phenomenon. The faces around her weren't there to appeal to season ticket holders or longtime women's basketball fans. They were there to pull in completely different audiences: NFL fans, pop culture followers, people who might not even know which team she plays for. That's a deliberate choice, and it's one Nike has historically reserved for athletes they believe can transcend their sport. Some fans immediately picked up on that. Online discussions started shifting from basketball performance to cultural reach. People weren't asking how many points she'd score next season. They were asking how big her brand could get. That's where the tension began to surface. Because by positioning Clark this way, Nike quietly removed the WNBA from the center of the story. The league wasn't the platform lifting her up. She was the figure being used to expand into new markets the league itself has spent decades trying to reach. To some, this felt empowering, proof that women's basketball finally had someone capable of breaking through the ceiling. To others, it felt uncomfortable, almost like the league was being skipped over in its own moment. And here's the part that raised the most eyebrows. This approach didn't come after a long, decorated professional career. It came early, very early, before multiple playoff runs, before championships, before the usual milestones that traditionally justify this level of global branding. Nike didn't wait for the resume to catch up. They bet on momentum. That's when fans started asking harder questions. If one player can be marketed independently of the league, what does that mean for everyone else? For team identity? For the WNBA's long-term leverage? Nothing about the campaign explicitly said, "We don't need the league." But it didn't say the opposite either. And in branding, silence can be louder than slogans. Because once a player is introduced to the world as bigger than her sport, it becomes very difficult for that sport to ever put her back inside the box. And that's when the conversation stopped being about marketing and started becoming about money. The branding sparked debate, but the money is what made everything uncomfortable. Because once reports about Caitlin Clark's endorsement numbers started circulating, the conversation shifted fast. This wasn't just about visibility anymore. It was about scale, about how wide the gap had suddenly become between one player's earning power and the financial reality of the rest of the league. Some reports claimed her long-term deal could eventually reach figures that dwarf not just rookie contracts, but entire team payrolls. While exact numbers were never officially confirmed, the estimates alone were enough to ignite backlash online. Fans started doing the math for themselves, comparing endorsement projections to the average WNBA salary, and the contrast was impossible to ignore. This is where the tone changed. It stopped being framed as celebration and started being framed as imbalance. For veterans who spent years fighting for better pay, better travel, and basic resources, the optics felt jarring to some fans. Not because Clark had done anything wrong, but because the system had never worked this way before. One player becoming an economic outlier so early forced everyone to confront an uncomfortable truth about how value is assigned in professional sports. And it wasn't just players noticing. Fans began questioning whether this level of financial separation could coexist with a league that prides itself on parity and collective progress. Some argued that stars have always driven leagues forward, and this was no different. Others pushed back, saying the gap felt too extreme, too fast. What made it even more sensitive was timing. The league was in the middle of negotiating its future: media rights, sponsorship growth, expansion talks. Suddenly, one athlete's market value seemed to be accelerating faster than the league infrastructure around her. That creates pressure. Not because wealth is bad, but because it changes dynamics. It alters how teammates are perceived, how opponents approach games, how officials' decisions are interpreted, even how criticism is received. And while no one publicly blamed Clark for any of this, the spotlight doesn't need permission to create tension. It just exists. Some fans defended her fiercely, saying she earned every dollar through performance and popularity. Others argued that the league hadn't yet figured out how to absorb a star this big without fracturing internally. Either way, the financial conversation crossed a line it couldn't uncross. Because once money becomes part of the story, everything else starts to feel different. And that difference began showing up somewhere very visible. On the court. Once the money entered the conversation, every possession started getting examined under a microscope. Plays that might have gone unnoticed before suddenly became talking points. Hard fouls, physical defense, missed calls. Social media clips slowed down, replayed, and debated for days, not because they were unprecedented, but because context had changed. Some fans believed the increased physicality was just playoff-level intensity arriving early. Others felt something more emotional was leaking onto the floor. Online, phrases like "message fouls" and "welcome to the league" started popping up, even though no one on the court ever said those words. It's important to be clear, there were no official accusations, no statements from players confirming intent, but perception doesn't require confirmation to spread. Moments like the widely discussed hard checks and late-game contact became symbols. To supporters, they represented a young star being tested. To critics, they looked like frustration bubbling over in real time. And to neutral fans, they raised a different question. Why did everything involving one player suddenly feel so loaded? Part of it came down to visibility. Every Clark possession was broadcast, clipped, and reposted. Players who had built careers without that level of attention were now playing under a brighter spotlight than ever before. That shift alone can change how games feel. Then there were the whistles, or the lack of them. Some fans argued officials were letting defenders be extra physical. Others claimed the calls were consistent and the outrage was exaggerated. The truth likely sat somewhere in between, but debate thrives in uncertainty. What mattered wasn't whether the moments were fair or unfair. It was how they were received. Every collision became evidence to someone's argument. Every no-call fed another narrative. And slowly, a season that should have been about growth became about tension. Not because players were fighting, not because the league had lost control on the court, but because the story around the games had changed. And while fans were arguing over fouls and footage, a much bigger decision was unfolding away from the hardwood, one that would reignite everything all over again. Just when the on-court debate started to cool, another moment snapped everything back into focus. This time, it wasn't a foul or a clip. It was a decision made off the floor, and one that many fans still haven't moved past. When the national team roster was announced, the explanation sounded simple. Experience mattered. Chemistry mattered. The goal was continuity, not disruption. On paper, it was a defensible choice. But in the court of public opinion, the timing made it feel anything but neutral. Because by then, Caitlin Clark wasn't just a rookie anymore. She was driving ratings, selling out arenas, pulling in viewers who hadn't watched women's basketball in years, and to a growing portion of fans, leaving her out felt disconnected from reality. Some supporters argued that international play shouldn't be influenced by popularity. Others countered that visibility had always played a role in growing the game. The debate split fast, and it never really settled. What made this decision linger was what happened afterward. As Clark's profile continued to rise, the omission started to look different in hindsight. Not necessarily wrong, but out of sync with the moment. Fans began revisiting the explanation, comparing it to how other rising stars had been handled in the past. And once the Nike campaign surfaced, the contrast became impossible to ignore. On one side, a conservative, process-driven selection philosophy. On the other, a global brand betting aggressively on momentum. No official connected the two. No statement suggested regret, but perception filled the silence. Online, some fans framed the decision as the league trying to slow something it didn't yet know how to manage. Others insisted it was simply about basketball readiness, nothing more. Both sides talked past each other, and the divide only widened. What's clear is this: that decision became symbolic, not because it defined her career, but because it highlighted a growing disconnect between institutional packing and public demand. The sport was moving faster than its systems. And once fans noticed that gap, they started asking tougher questions about who decisions are really for and whether the league was prepared for a star who didn't fit the traditional timeline. Because the issue was no longer about one roster spot. It was about whether women's basketball was ready for the kind of spotlight it had finally attracted, and what happens when growth arrives faster than comfort. As the spotlight grew brighter, the conversation shifted again, this time into territory many fans weren't prepared for, but couldn't ignore either. Across social media, podcasts, and comment sections, broader questions started surfacing. Not official statements, not locker room quotes, just patterns people thought they were noticing. And while none of it was confirmed, the volume alone made it part of the story. Some fans began debating whether perception played a role in how Clark was received. Others pushed back hard, arguing that success always attracts resistance, regardless of who you are. What made this moment different was how quickly those discussions spread and how emotionally charged they became. It's important to frame this carefully. No one involved publicly attributed motives. No player, coach, or executive went on record making claims about intent. But fans don't need confirmation to speculate, and speculation thrives when visibility explodes overnight. The league has always been built on shared struggle and collective progress. Many longtime supporters pride themselves on that identity. So when one athlete suddenly becomes the focal point of attention, money, and marketing, it can feel disruptive, even threatening, to the culture people worked hard to protect. Some fans interpreted the pushback as resistance to change. Others saw it as frustration boiling over after years of being overlooked. And many felt both things could be true at once. What complicated matters further was how polarized the audience became. Criticism that might have once been routine now felt personal. Praise felt amplified. Neutral analysis got drowned out. Every discussion turned into a referendum. And that's the danger of rapid growth. When a sport expands faster than its internal narratives can adjust, everything feels louder. Misunderstandings multiply, intent gets assumed, and conversations that should be nuanced get flattened into sides. Clark didn't create that environment, but she became the center of it. Some fans believe this phase is inevitable, that every league reaches a point where visibility forces uncomfortable conversations into the open. Others worry that mishandling these moments could fracture trust between players, fans, and leadership. What's clear is that the discourse itself became part of the pressure. Not just on Clark, on the league, on its identity. And while people were arguing about what these conversations meant, Nike was focused on something much simpler: positioning. Because behind the noise, the brand was preparing a move that would raise the stakes even higher. The shoe is where everything shifts from debate to leverage. In basketball culture, a signature shoe isn't just merchandise. It's status, it's permanence. It's the difference between being part of the league and standing above it. And that's why this upcoming release carries so much weight, far beyond points per game or win-loss records. Only a small group of players ever reach this level. Even fewer do it this early. Traditionally, signature shoes come after championships, MVPs, or years of dominance. This one is arriving on momentum, visibility, and cultural pull. That alone tells you Nike isn't following the usual playbook. What really raised eyebrows wasn't just the shoe itself, but the branding around it. The logo, the design language, the way it's being positioned as something you recognize instantly without needing a team name or league attached. That's intentional. Because once a player becomes a standalone brand, the relationship with the league changes. Fans started picking up on this quickly. Online discussions shifted from performance to independence. People weren't asking how the shoe would represent the WNBA. They were asking whether it needed to at all. Some reports and industry speculation suggest Nike is preparing this launch on a scale rarely seen in women's basketball. Larger inventory, broader distribution, lifestyle appeal beyond the court. While none of those details are officially confirmed, the signals are hard to miss. And this is where things get complicated. If the shoe crosses over, if it becomes something people wear to school, to work, to everyday life, then Clark's value stops being tied to the league's schedule or broadcast windows. Her relevance doesn't disappear when the season ends. That's a level of autonomy most leagues quietly fear. Not because it's bad for the sport, but because it shifts negotiating power. When fans recognize a logo before they recognize a team, loyalty changes. When a brand markets an athlete globally, the league becomes one piece of a much larger ecosystem, not the center of it. Some supporters see this as progress, proof that women's basketball has finally produced a figure who can stand shoulder to shoulder with the sport's biggest names. Others worry it creates an imbalance the league isn't built to manage. Because if one player becomes bigger than the structure around her, every future decision becomes harder. Marketing, scheduling, media rights, discipline, promotion. Everything starts to orbit one gravity point. And that's the real reason this shoe matters. It's not about fashion. It's not even about basketball. It's about what happens when a league spends decades building itself and suddenly has to adapt to a star who no longer needs to be built at all. And that leaves the WNBA facing a question it can't avoid much longer. This is where the situation stops being about one player and turns into a structural dilemma. The WNBA is now balancing two competing realities. On one side, it has spent years emphasizing fairness, shared opportunity, and collective advancement. On the other, it's facing a star whose market value is accelerating faster than any system the league currently has in place. That creates tension, not because anyone made a mistake, but because the model was never designed for this speed of growth. If the league leans too hard into one player, it risks alienating veterans who built the foundation. If it pulls back too much, it risks leaving money, momentum, and new fans on the table. There's no clean solution. Every move carries consequences. Fans have already started debating what comes next. Some believe the league has to fully embrace star-driven growth, even if it feels uncomfortable. Others argue that preserving balance is what makes the WNBA different and more sustainable long-term. History offers parallels. Every major sports league eventually faces this moment. A breakout figure arrives before the infrastructure is ready. The establishment hesitates, the audience surges, and control becomes harder to maintain. What makes this moment unique is timing. Media rights negotiations are looming. Expansion is on the table. Visibility has never been higher. And now, the league's most valuable asset isn't just a player, it's a brand operating on a global scale. That shifts power quietly but dramatically. Because once networks, sponsors, and casual fans start associating the league with one name, decision-making becomes more fragile. Optics matter more, perception matters more, and missteps carry heavier consequences. The WNBA isn't losing relevance. It's gaining it faster than expected. But rapid growth doesn't come with instructions. And now the league has to answer a question it never planned for. How do you govern a sport when its biggest star no longer fits neatly inside the system designed to protect it? Because next season won't just be about wins and losses. It will be about authority, leverage, and whether the league can evolve without losing what made it matter in the first place. And that brings us to the final question fans can't stop asking. What started as a breakout season has turned into a defining moment for the entire league. Not because of one shot, one foul, or one decision, but because Caitlin Clark has forced women's basketball to confront something it's never had to face at this scale before. A star whose influence stretches beyond the court, beyond the league, beyond the usual rules. The Nike campaign didn't create the tension, it exposed it. It revealed how success can arrive faster than comfort, how growth can challenge tradition, and how visibility, once unlocked, can't be carefully controlled or evenly distributed, no matter how much a league might want it to be. None of this makes Clark a villain. None of it makes the league wrong. It simply means the WNBA is standing at a crossroads every major sports organization eventually reaches. Do you protect the system as it is, or do you adapt to the star redefining it? Because the truth is, this moment isn't just about Caitlin Clark's future. It's about how the league handles the next one, and the one after that. It's about whether women's basketball can grow without fracturing, and whether unity can survive when popularity isn't shared equally. The uncomfortable part is this: there may not be a perfect answer, only trade-offs. And as next season approaches, one thing is clear: the league isn't just managing games anymore. It's managing power, perception, and a spotlight that's only getting brighter. So the real question is whether the WNBA is ready for Caitlin Clark. It's whether it's ready for what comes after her.